All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call the May 25th Board of Education meeting to order. Do we have any comments from the public on closed session items?
I've just opened the chat.
All right. We are going to adjourn to closed session.
You had about 30 minutes.
See y'all in a minute.
All right, looks like we're all here. So we are going to reconvene the meeting. First item, adoption and approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so next up we have special recognition, students of the month from Kenilworth, Petaluma, Casa, and Kenilworth.
Kenilworth Junior High School is proud to introduce our May Student of the Month, Andy Fong. Andy was chosen Student of the Month because of his academic excellence and his exemplary citizenship. Andy has maintained a 4.0 grade point average through the time as a student at Kenilworth. And remarkably, this year, Andy has earned an A+ grade in all of his classes during every grading period. Bright, funny, motivated, and hardworking are just few of the traits Andy's teachers use to describe him. Miss Menares, Andy's accelerated math teacher, shared, Andy is an excellent math student. Andy always takes his time to show his work in great detail. He's always on task, attentive, and ready to answer questions when called on. Andy is an outstanding student and pleasure to have in class. Miss Chavez, Andy's advanced English teacher, enthusiastically added, Andy is a wonderful student who has always put exceptional effort into everything he does. He's a strong writer, and I enjoy the clever wit and historical details he includes in his writing. For example, the novel he wrote this year was based on times during the Crusades, and he referred to the main character as a lad, and one who was deciding whether he should join the Battle of the Crusades. And he even addressed the question of why people should fight. It was engaging, well-written, and wise. Miss Fahey, Andy's PE teacher, summed up nicely how his teachers feel about him. Andy is awesome. He never makes any excuses and holds himself to the highest standard. His personality shines to the screen. Thank you for making distance learning so enjoyable. In his free time, Andy enjoys playing video games and teaching himself how to play guitar and can be a voracious reader. And Andy shared that while at Sonoma Mountain Elementary School during the 1 million word reading challenge, he read over 15 million words and for 3 straight years read more than any other student in the school. After high school, Andy would like to attend college. However, he is really focusing on the more immediate tasks, such as being successful in high school. When asked to share the secret of his academic success, Andy shared these wise words that will continue to serve him well in the future. Stay focused in class and really listen to your teachers. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. That is really important. We at Kenilworth are confident that Andy will continue to shine in high school and beyond. Congratulations, Andy. And then for the other student of the month, Kenilworth Junior High School is proud to introduce our student body president and our May Student of the Month, Ava Hajiji. Ava was chosen Student of the Month because she is one of our brightest students, one of our most impressive leaders, and she is an inspiration to her teachers and classmates. Ava has truly shined during her time at Kenilworth, whether it's been in person, during distance learning, or during hybrid learning. Ava has earned a 4.0 grade point average her entire time as a student at Kenilworth, including earning 6 A+ grades the first semester. Ava has certainly earned the universal praise and admiration of her teachers. Ms. Hopkins, Ava's leadership teacher, shared, as Kenilworth's ASB class president, Ava truly shines as a leader in enrollment for our school. She brings great ideas to the ASB leadership class on how to make Kenilworth a better place. Her vivacious personality encourages others to step out of their comfort zone and help the school alongside her. Ms. Fahey, Ava's PE teacher, added, Ava is an all-star. She always goes above and beyond to immerse herself in the class curriculum. Ava is a natural leader and her charisma is contagious. Ms. Chavez, Ava's advanced teacher, added, Ava is a wonderful student. I can always count on her to share her ideas, thoughts, and responses with her classes, often when no one else is willing to. I really appreciate this. She is thoughtful, creative, insightful, and cares deeply about social justice issues. Ava has been a pleasure to have in class this year, and her positive enthusiasm is good for all of us. When Ava is not in school, she can be found playing lacrosse. Ava has played lacrosse for 5 years and has been a valuable member to her team as a defender and a goalkeeper. Ava plans on playing lacrosse at Casa Grande High School, as well as impressively, Ava has also found time to be assistant Girl Scout troop leader the last 3 years. After high school, Ava would like to attend a university in Southern California and possibly pursue a career as a therapist for children and teenagers. We at Kenilworth are certain that Ava has a bright future ahead of her. We are proud she's a Colt. Congratulations, Ava.
I'm not sure if we were called because I was kind of switching to panel. Is it for PJHS now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We are proud to present Amelia Berryhill as one of our final students of the month for 2021. Amelia is highly capable, passionate, well-rounded, and a motivated individual with a deep concern for the natural environment. Academically, Amelia is an excellent student. Her transcript yields straight A's in rigorous classes despite the disruption of distance learning. Her teachers have a lot to say. Her math teacher shares, Amelia has been a leading student in Math 8 from the start. Even over distance learning, she has demonstrated a commitment to understanding the concepts, submitting high-quality work, and doing it on time. In class, she has continually contributed to the whole class discussions and, as a member of smaller groups, was both approachable and helpful. She is a joy to teach. And her PE teacher adds, Amelia is extremely consistent student who participates well in class and always demonstrates quality work. She is polite and respectful to others. Beyond academics, Amelia is involved in many things. She is very artistic and a talented member of the photography club. She is also one of the primary members of the school's Climate Action Club. Earlier this year, she combined her talents and created meaningful paintings expressing the importance of climate change. You can find Amelia's contribution on the Talking Fence at Petaluma Arts Center. During the summers, Amelia enjoys participating in the Cinnabar Theater camp productions. Amelia is also graceful and strong. A few years ago, she placed second for girls long jump in Westside Relays. She's a roller skater and she ice skates regularly. In her spare time, in addition to practicing her photography, Amelia loves to draw, paint, and write short stories. And Amelia is a loyal friend. Amelia's goal in life is to understand herself as best she can. Her parents add, we are so proud of Amelia. She is such a hardworking and very dedicated student. Thank you for acknowledging her. This is not the first time Petaluma Junior High has recognized Amelia. Last year, she received the Principal's Award recognizing her for her outstanding effort. We want to continue to honor this by her caring and hard work for this young woman. We are both pleased and honored to have Amelia Berryhill represent Petaluma Junior High School as Student of the Month for May 2021.
Thanks, Aaliyah. I'm going to read the next one. We are honored to present Uriel Hernandez Barrera as one of our May 2021 Students of the Month. Uriel is a young man with a strong work ethic, which he applies to both school and life. Although he hasn't found his path, Uriel looks forward to figuring out his goals and putting his energy into achieving them. Uriel is a strong student who really enjoys school. His teachers have a lot to say about Uriel's strengths. Uriel is a student that always asks for clarification or questions during class. He is attentive, always participates, and has his camera on. He is a pleasure to come to class. He always comes to office hours 3 to 4 times a week and turns in his work on time. And Uriel is a student who works very hard to complete his work. He pays attention to detail and gets his work in on time. Lastly, Uriel is always working hard and staying on task. Outside of school, Uriel remains active and engaged. He plays basketball for the Boys and Girls Club. He is involved in his church. And before the pandemic, he regularly practiced Taekwondo. In 6th grade, he participated in the West Side Relays and really enjoyed the experience. His other hobbies include playing video games, doing artwork, and working out. His parents add, "Congratulations to our son for receiving this recognition. We are very proud of him and we love him very much. We will always be with him to support his decisions and help him fulfill his goals." Uriel Hernandez Barrera is an amazing and dependable young man. He is one of those model students who will continue to persevere and thrive. We are proud to have him represent Petaluma Junior High as Student of the Month.
Okay, just promoting all the CASA people. Should be up in a minute.
Grande is proud to present Rachel Garrier, sorry if I mispronounced your last name, for this month's Student of the Month. Throughout high school, Rachel participated in Casa Grande's journalism program, where she found her love for journalism and writing. She plans on attending UC Davis to study communications. However, she intends to keep her mind open in search of finding new passions through her general education courses and extracurricular activities. At Casa Grande, Rachel's favorite class was AP Human Geography, where she was able to learn about different cultures and the way humans live in regions of the world. Later in her life, she hopes to travel internationally and gain new perspectives on the world. In her free time, Rachel likes to go on hikes around the Bay Area, spend time with her family and friends, eat good food, and visit her summer house near the Russian River. Congratulations, Rachel. Casa Grande would also like to, is also privileged. Casa Grande is proud to present Alyssa Wiggins. Alyssa describes her high school experience as slightly unique. Aside from the global pandemic, which ended her junior year early, she broke her leg freshman year, which stopped her track season. This means sophomore year was her only normal season for track and field, and even that was underwhelming since she was still rebuilding strength. She also participated in basketball freshman year through junior year. As of interest outside of high school, there are many. Art, exercise, listening to music and podcasts, and cartoons are the majority time wasters she enjoys. She has painted and sculpted, almost collapsed from weightlifting, and listened to media ranging from pop music to conspiracy theorist podcasts. In the future, Alyssa would like to be involved in sports medicine, possibly as a sports medicine physician. Senior year, she chose to work part-time in order to start saving for college and begin pursuing her goals. With high school coming to a close, Alyssa plans to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C. in the fall as a biology major. Congratulations, Alyssa.
So I'm not seeing Julia to present for the PHS Students of the Month or any admin from PHS. And they're our last group.
Do we have a copy of their write-ups?
I don't.
Can we
No,
move them to the next meeting and just have those two? I know we usually do student reports, but if we could recognize those guys.
Yeah, we could move them.
Okay.
We'll just
We
do it.
actually have an April student in the audience who was hoping to be recognized tonight as well. So is there any way that maybe we could just move on to the next two items and then come back? And I can try to reach out to Julia.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so is this you, Matthew? Introduction of new director of food services?
It sure is.
Okay.
So Ashley, could you bring Edgar up, please? Mr. Edgar Garcia.
On his way.
Thank you. There he is. Hi, Edgar.
Hello.
Welcome. All right. So just want to announce our new director of food service for Pelham City School District, Edgar Garcia. We're pleased to announce the selection of Edgar Garcia. He will assume his duties on June 1st, 2021, so very soon. Edgar has 5 years of school nutrition service experience, as well as 10 years in the fine dining culinary field. The last year and a half, he has worked as an area supervisor for San Francisco Unified School District, where he supervised the administration of the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, and After School Snack Program. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Edgar facilitated a successful transition to grab-and-go distribution sites. Prior to his time at San Francisco Unified, Edgar spent 4 years at the Anaheim Union High School District as a food service manager. Edgar is fluent in Spanish, and he is passionate about feeding and supporting all students and families. His goal is to create not only nutritious food, but also delicious food. He has dedicated himself to becoming a skilled manager and also finding ways to pass these skills on to his staff. Edgar believes that by building a strong team, we can better meet the needs of our district and students. Edgar believes schools are in a unique position to promote healthy eating behaviors and attitudes toward food among the vast majority of children. With consistent and accurate messaging about good nutrition and ways to learn about and practice healthy eating, Edgar feels schools can play an important role in helping students establish healthy eating habits. As someone who grew up participating in the National School Lunch Program, Edgar also believes school lunchrooms serve not only as a place for students to be exposed to new and healthy menu items, but also learn what a balanced meal looks like. Edgar plans to work with staff to encourage all students to try new foods and expand their palates. Edgar's belief is that by feeding children a healthy and balanced diet, schools can support students and families by fostering their growing minds and bodies and enable students to better access their academics. Edgar also believes the first step to getting students invested in school nutrition is making sure they know who they can talk to about their school meals. Edgar wants to engage with students and help them become active participants in building healthy and student-friendly meal plans. Edgar was awarded his Bachelor of Science degree in Culinary Management from the Art Institute of California in Orange County. He received the Orange County Environmental Health Division Award of Excellence in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Congratulations and welcome to Pelham City Schools, Edgar.
Thank you.
And might I just add that we are super excited to have Edgar joining our team. He's actually already been transitioning in with us, getting set up in his office, and we're just super thrilled to have him joining the team. And Ray and he are already starting to go around and get to know the schools. And so anyway, welcome, Edgar. We can't say how happy we are. We're just thrilled.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, Ashley, could you, thank you, Edgar. Could you bring up Mr. Luis Garza, please? There he is. Hi, Luis.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Welcome. All right. So Luis, we're pleased to announce the selection of a new assistant principal of Casa Grande High School, Luis Garza. Luis will assume his duties July 1st, 2021. Luis has 19 years of experience in education and has spent the last 18 years working at the Oakland Military Institute, where he has held a variety of roles, most recently serving as their head teacher. Luis was promoted to head teacher at the start of the pandemic when the instructional staff had to learn how to educate students in a whole new way. Together, they overcame the challenges, focusing on the importance of student engagement. They found ways to better leverage their informational systems to track and identify ways they could connect with students who were isolated. Luis and his team adopted instructional tools that enabled them to monitor and promote student participation. Luis is fluent in Spanish and was initially hired as an ELD teacher. Since that time, Luis obtained his master's degree of teaching speakers of other languages and also became nationally board certified in English as a new language. Luis helped to establish an ELD program and integrate it into the fabric of his school. Luis promoted the effectiveness of the instructional staff by providing professional development designed to improve English learners' academic achievement. When his school was faced with WASC's recertification, Luis showed true leadership as he facilitated the process, and his school received a 6-year certification and embarked on improving their academic program. Luis began to see the power data had to positively impact student outcomes and decided to pursue this new interest, forging a new kind of position at his site as data coach. In this capacity, Luis worked with stakeholders through the first administrators of the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, the CAST. And building on that success, the administration granted him more responsibilities, managing the school's assessments and accountability. While reviewing our webpage, Luis was encouraged to find that we share many of the same commitments to equity and social justice. He feels that we can empower youth from all backgrounds with education, and he would like to work with Petaluma City School District to positively impact students' lives, preparing them for a better future. In his interview, Luis talked about wanting to partner with the staff at CASA and to create a culture where people are comfortable sharing their opinions, even if the opinion is not shared by the majority. Luis works to build consensus as long as it is in service to students. Luis's North Pole is creating a school environment where all students are successful and empowered. Luis is approachable and transparent, and he wants to build partnerships such that all families feel comfortable approaching him with questions. Luis has an extensive background in trauma-informed practices and holds a deep belief that relationships are key. He is committed to building bridges between families and the school. Luis was awarded his Bachelor's of Arts degree in drama, a Master's of Arts degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages, and a single subject English credential from San Francisco State University. He also holds a Master's of Science degree in educational leadership from California State University, East Bay. Welcome to Petaluma City Schools, Luis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel that was a great introduction. I'm very excited to be working with all of you, and I really appreciate this opportunity. It's really nice to work in a community so close to where I live. I've usually had to travel across the Bay, and so thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I love seeing everyone like Ellen's like drama and Sheldon's like San Francisco State. Like,
go Gators.
One of the board members' passions.
Got a lot of those.
Thank you. Welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Next up, May Revise. Is that you, Chris?
It is. It's always a hard act to follow.
I know. I'm like, oh, really? Budget?
I know. I promise Edgar and Luis that they'll get far more kudos than I will get on the May Revise. Okay, so let me start my PowerPoint. It's only 300 pages, slides. Oops. Okay, let me do this. Okay. Okay, everybody can see it okay? Okay, I'm going to go through a lot of slides tonight. Most of them are just really visual aids. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining it, just making brief comments. So it feels like a lot more slides than it really, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each slide. So this is, so the governor comes out every May 15th with what's called as his May Revise. And it's really the last step before it goes into the final state budget process. The state legislature has to adopt this plan, the spending plan, by June 15th, or they don't get paid. And so we feel pretty confident ever since that law changed that we have an on-time budget. This May Revise includes updated revenue projections and his proposals based on the latest receipts and economic forecasts, typically through the end of April, and again, known as May revise. And then we go immediately into, or we continue on with our budget development process because, as you know, the board has to adopt a budget and submit to the County Office of Education on or before June 30th. And then come July, once we know what the state budget is, the final state budget, we'll compare it to the assumptions we included. And if there's material differences, we will disclose within 45 days an adjustment to our budget based on the final state budget. This just, you know, the budget, again, he's looking at all these economic forecasts. And so I just wanted to show some of these were really interesting, those visual aids. You can see the GDP and that second quarter of 2020, and that's when March hit and the entire economy shut down, not only in the state of California, but across the nation. You can see that huge dip. That's also in part why we got hit with such a huge deficit from the state back in June when Governor Newsom was proposing a 10% deficit on our revenue. If you'll recall, oh, what a difference a year makes. It's kind of crazy. And maybe you'll remember back then, they talked about that V-shaped recovery versus a U recovery. And so this is indicative of a V-shaped recovery, because then you see in Q3 how those revenues or the GDP jumps back up. And then what's also compelling about the slide is that Q4 and Q1 of this year actually hold pretty strong. If you look at that compared to 2019 and 2018, that continues to be pretty strong, stronger than what we've seen the last couple of years. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, again, you can see how it's up and down and up and down and up and down, but generally it's going up and up and up. And you can see that huge dip back on March 17th of 2020, when the stock market, everything just kind of crashed down because, of course, the pandemic hit, the shutdown hit, and investors were super nervous about what that meant for the economy. But look how much it's not only recovered, but actually continued to grow beyond that. And this is part of why some of these indicators that I'm going to show you is part of why we're seeing such a strong budget proposal from Governor Newsom. National Consumer Price Index, again, this is just showing inflation. This is the other side of the coin, because you've probably heard on the news that with everything going on, the idea of inflation and the potential of inflation is greater than it's been in the past couple of years at least. And the feds have not decided to increase interest rates as a way to kind of offset that inflation. But you can see really the drivers here are gasoline and fuel and oil. And then again, this is the unemployment rate. This is another indicator of kind of what's been going on. And you can see how in 2020, it shot way up to over 15%. And again, this is the blue line being California and the red line being the US. And you can see how they mirror each other in timing. California taking a little bit longer to recover than the national recovery. And you can see we're not quite back down to where we were pre-pandemic. Now, even though that unemployment you just saw in the prior slide, look at the estimate for personal income taxes. You can see the January, that blue is the January's budget proposal, and then orange is the May revise, and based on the latest and greatest. And you can see that the estimate for personal income tax is up for both 2021 and 21-22. And so even though we have numerous people still on unemployment, they're tending to be those service industries where they're the lower wage earners, and therefore they're the lower income tax. And so personal income tax continues to climb because those higher wage earners and the higher taxpayers are tending to do very well throughout this recession. It's a very lopsided economic impact based on the pandemic, as opposed to the recession when everybody was hit generally in a similar way. Here we have this huge disparity in how the service industry workers were impacted, where other industries not only were not impacted, but some of them actually thrived during the pandemic. Think about people who make plexiglass or people who make face masks. And then capital gains. This is another big one for California because a lot of our economy and the volatility in our state budget is tied to capital gains. So this just kind of shows you the capital gains realizations, and you can see that significant dip in 2008. That was during the Great Recession when capital gains dropped significantly. And you can see since then, it's been on a steady up and up and up trajectory with a few dips here and there. But again, capital gains are very, very volatile. They can be. You can see in 1995, and then they jump up in 2000 and then back down in 2002, 2003. And so this again is why sometimes those huge fluctuations in the wealth of the state level and why it's impacted school budgets. This is also why Governor Brown established that rainy day fund so that he could accommodate some of these huge fluctuations. Sales and use tax, again, just another indication. You can see the difference here between the January budget proposal and the May revise. It's such a dramatic difference over the past 6 months. Corporate income tax, similar changes you can see from the January budget proposal to the May revise. And this is why, again, is May revise is dramatically different with many of the programs that he is proposing, both one-time and ongoing. Okay, so kind of into the meat and potatoes of K12 education, he's proposing a 5.07 mega COLA. What does that mean, mega COLA? I've heard that in the news several times. It essentially means that the COLA for 2020-21, remember we got 0 COLA on our funding for this year, but we were owed a COLA of 2.31 because the COLA is in statute. So, and because under Prop 98, they still owe us money for 2020-21. He's proposing that that get combined with the 1.77 COLA in statute for 21-22. And then he's adding 1% roughly on top of that for this combined cumulative COLA. So you can't add them up exactly because it's 2.31. The 1% mega COLA is on top of the 1.77, which is on top of the 2.31. And so that's when we come up with this 5.07. We don't get a percentage increase on our LCFF. We get a dollar amount. So what they do is they convert that 5.07 COLA into the dollar amount it represents on our base grants and on our grade span adjustments. And so you can see the impact. K3, it means it's an increase of 390, 4.6, 396, 7.8, 408, and 9.12, 473. So that's per ADA, or average daily attendance. So you can see our base grants go up proportionately or by that dollar amount. And then the grade span adjustments for K3 and for career tech ed on the 912 level, that 255, are then added. And then you can see the supplemental grant, which is 20%, which we get because we're roughly anywhere from 38 to 45%, depending on the district, elementary versus secondary. We do not benefit from any of the concentration grants. And I will say that part of his May revise was proposing increasing that 50% up to 65% and doing a significant funding increase for those concentration grant, which is already disproportionately out of whack with the base and with the supplemental grant funding. And so whether or not that becomes reality or not, I don't know.
Chris, can you explain the grade span adjustment?
Yeah, the grade span adjustment. So remember, we used to have formerly known as class size reduction. And so we used to have K3 class size reduction. So when they got rid of the old revenue limit and they went to the LCFF, they gave us a grade span adjustment, K3, in order to keep class size at 24:1. Now, I will tell you, how does that compare to the former K3 class size reduction program, which was 20:1? We used to get about 1,100 per student. So we would report how many students were in grades TK through 3rd grade, and then we would get approximately 1,100. This is now $300 less, $250, $300 less, and it's per ADA, not per enrollment. So we only get 96%, 95% on the dollar. So does that explain it? And then the grade span adjustment for the 912 is to help offset the cost of career tech education at the high school level.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So remember all those deferrals in the governor's budget for this year. It was $9.2 billion, and he was deferring a significant amount of cash away from districts from this current fiscal year and into the following fiscal year, which created potentially dramatic cash flow challenges. So in January, he had proposed eliminating some of the deferrals, and then he's proposing eliminating even more. Now remember, this is for 21-22. we still have those deferrals existing in 2020-21. Even in his proposal, we would not get any dollars in June. Those dollars would come in July. So even though we still have payroll to make, cover payroll and other costs, he's proposing an ongoing deferral for June. Managing enrollment and average daily attendance, or ADA. This is becoming a huge topic, and Gary alluded to this earlier. You can see the 2018-19, and this is per DataQuest, so this is based on CBED's information, reported enrollment, 6,186,000 students, right? And then it dropped in 1920 to 6,163. Now we know anecdotally that it dropped, that was October to October, right? October 18 to October of 19. We know that then in October of 20, it dropped down to 6 million. That's a lot of students to have just dropped out of the state's enrollment banks. And we know that anecdotally from October of 20 to now, we lost even more students. And I'll show you that a little bit later on. So this is a huge issue for many, many districts, almost every district. I've gone through all the CBEDs for our feeder districts in Petaluma, and they're all down students, CBEDs 2019 to CBEDs 2020. I don't have access to their current enrollment data. So the real issue is right now in this proposal, he's basically saying, okay, we're going to hold you harmless for ADA one more year. You're going to continue, we're going to get to continue to use 2019-20 ADA, which is driving 2021. We'll also get to use it to drive our LCFF calculations for 2021-22. And then we go back to the normal for 22-23, which is going to be challenging if we don't see the return of some of these students or most of these students. I'm going to show you some enrollment projections in a few minutes. Charter schools are exempt from this. And so this slide is talking about how the hold harmless doesn't apply to charter schools. For us, it's actually a positive thing because our charter schools are growing. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. So we want to use current year or projected ADA for our charter schools. It became a cap for us in 2020-21 because we had growth. Think about Penn Grove, we added a 19th classroom, but we couldn't reap the benefit of that additional ADA because we were stuck in 2019-20 ADA. So we don't have an issue with our charters. All of our charters are flat or growing. So part of the challenge is when you're in declining enrollment, especially serious declining enrollment, you lose your revenues far faster or at a much greater pace than you can cut expenditures. There's a lot of fixed costs. Think of a school, for example. If we have a school, we already have a secretary and probably other clerical support staff. We have the elementary school, 2 custodians, we have a principal. Those are all, we pay utilities. You know, the cost of operating a school from a utility perspective is about the same, whether you have 200 students or 300 students, right? Because you're using generally the same amount of classrooms. You're watering the fields the same way. Maybe the toilets are getting flushed less, but it's just not that dramatic. So fixed costs for a school stay relatively flat and stable. And what you're doing is you're reducing instructional staff. Oh, you dropped 24 kids, so we're going to have 1 less teacher next year, right? But the problem is revenues go down at a much greater pace based on ADA drops than you can actually cut staff. And so when districts go into a declining enrollment, it becomes super challenging. And this is when we talk about our reserves, why it's really important that we maintain strong reserves so that we can accommodate that and really methodically address declining enrollment. If that's, I mean, we're in declining enrollment. The question is, will we stay in declining enrollment? So this is another thing in the governor's budget proposal I thought was important to highlight. He's basically saying that in-person instruction is the default for this year. Current distance learning statutes expire June 30th. And so for families that remain hesitant, you know, he's basically saying you can use independent study. So we basically go back to in-person instruction in the traditional model, doing traditional ADA, and we have our independent study program where we can use that for more virtual learning if that's what we're going to do, but it will follow the independent study model. It will not follow a hybrid or what we've done this year during the pandemic as a distance learning model. So does that make sense? There's really only 2 options that he's including. Now, whether the state budget changes or adds the state legislature, we don't know, but in his proposal, it's basically full-time in-person instruction or independent study under the current statutes. Transitional kindergarten, this was another, again, this is, oh, what a difference a year makes, right? Last year, 10% reduction. This year, he's basically proposing beginning in 22-23, so not 21-22, starting to implement full transitional kinder for all 4-year-olds, and it would be phased in 22-23. It would expand to 4-year-olds whose 5th birthday occurs between September 2nd and March 2nd. Currently, it's September 2nd and December 2nd. So that expands it. And then 23-24, it would expand to June 2nd, and then 24-25, it would go from September 2nd to September 1st, basically capturing all 4-year-olds within a transitional kinder. I think part of the rationale with implementing it in a phased-in approach is there could be a lot of facilities issues because all of a sudden you're talking about adding classrooms. If you think about a school like Pengrove or even Grant, where we don't have a lot of room to add portables, you know, impacted classrooms could be pretty hard to address. And so with that, he's also proposing some grants to help with facilities issues, basically for full day kinder, kind of as a implementation year to start getting ready for this. So he's really looking at 21-22 as a year to try to get ready. So some one-time 190 million, construct and retrofit existing facilities to expand TK, or for those districts that don't already offer full-time, full-day kinder programs. They may not be used to purchase portable classrooms, which I think is interesting. So fortunately, you probably saw earlier, about a month ago, that we took 2 proposals to you for both McKinley and Pengrove to contemplate replacing some buildings with greater building capacity. It wasn't really in anticipation of this, it's really in anticipation of just natural growth that we're experiencing at those 2 schools, but that could actually serve, and as we get more information, we may have to tweak what we're doing with those 2 projects to make sure we have enough room. Does that make sense? Okay. Community schools, this is another proposal, and I haven't put up a slide for every proposal, but I thought some that are relevant for us. He's proposing one-time $3 billion investment over several years. So it's a one-time $3 billion across several years to establish new and expanded existing community schools. So this is not the former community day school that we had. This is actually a community school where it's really about wraparound services to students and their families. And we have 2 or 3 schools that maybe could really benefit from this type of community school concept. This, it's kind of wait and see. We need to kind of get more information about that, but there are going to be grants for up to 1,400 LEAs to convert schools into full service community schools with integrated health, mental health, social services, and then of course, quality instruction. So this is one that I thought was really intriguing. It'll be interesting to see if it gets rolled into the final budget, and then getting more details, because of course the devil will be in the details for this. Some other one-time proposals: $7 billion to expand broadband and reliable internet service. Now we've pretty much done most of that. David Fisher and I have had kind of some of these conversations. And then $3 billion over 5 years in a number of departments to identify and treat behavioral health needs early, including trauma, depression, anxiety. So that may be something that we're able to tap into as well. These are some of the one-time proposals. Okay, so again, going back to really the meat and potatoes of what we're doing in our budget, this kind of gives you what it was in January and then what it was in the May revise. And you can see that 5.07 mega COLA, and you can see down below it's made up of the 2.31, the 1.7, and then an additional 1%. And again, that math won't add up perfectly because it's cumulative. And then you can see what the COLAs are in the out years, 2022, 23, 23, 24. Again, these are just projections. They don't know what those actual COLAs will be. These are some other parts of the dartboard. Again, we were talking about inflation. So look under other planning, you can see the California Consumer Price Index. See how in 21-22, they're projecting it to jump to 3.84. Basically, that is what we track when we're thinking about utility costs and when we're thinking about the cost of purchasing goods. And you can see how that 3.84 is pretty high compared to what a typical year is. And I will tell you, our utility costs are dramatically increasing. Garbage in particular, we actually may be coming back and bringing RFP to find a new provider because garbage costs are going through the roof. And stay tuned, I'll be providing you more information on that. So utilities in general are definitely going up, but garbage in particular. CalPERS, this is something to be keeping an eye on. Again, our rates are going up. If you look at the far right side column, this is the 21-22 rate. It's 22.91, and that's up from 20.9 this year. So it's a over 2% increase, and I'll show you that in a minute. What does that mean for us? And then look how it's slated to go up in the out years. And then CalSTRS, same thing. It was supposed to go down. It's currently 16.15. It was supposed to go down to 15.92. As you recall, we were projecting in the multi-year projections the savings, but instead it's going up to 16.92, and that's a 0.77 increase. So that's kind of dramatic for us. And then you can see it was slated to be lower in those out years, and now it's slated to be higher. This impacts the multi-year projections that I have to do because I have to incorporate the dollars that those increases represent into our multi-year projections. So what do we know? We know we'll have an on-time state budget. We know legislators want to get paid. We're planning on a 5.07% COLA to the LCFF as per the May revise. The STRS rate, the PERS rate, state unemployment insurance has gone from 0.05% to 1.23%. It's a huge increase. I'm going to tell you what the dollar amount I'm estimating that this will represent in a few minutes. We're going to continue to use 1920 ADA, P2 ADA for 21-22, and we're staffing based on current enrollment projections. So here's the dollar amounts. So you can see that STRS rate, instead of having like a roughly $50,000 savings, we're going to look at about a $265,000 cost across the general fund. That doesn't include adult ed. And then the PERS rate going, it's an increase of 2.21%. That's generally roughly about a $300,000 cost. And then the SUA rate, $600,000. That's what we're projecting. That is a huge, dramatic increase. And that, you know, is kind of indicative of what we've been hearing on the news about EDD and the state unemployment stuff that's been happening. And then we also think on the more positive side, we also know we're going to get some increases in revenue for our charter schools, Pengrove and PAX, for example. I'm roughly estimating about 250. We're in the process of completing our LCFF calculations. So when I present the budget in a couple weeks, you'll see what those increases are looking like. And then step and column, I'm currently estimating at 1%. Again, we're still working through position control and making sure all those budgets are done. What we don't know, what will the final state budget look like in June? All of our budget that we're building is either based on the best information we have right now, like the STRS and PERS and the SUI, and the May revise. And then any other information that we can gather, such as, you know, what our utility costs are projected to be based on our current trends. We don't know transitional kinder. Will that happen for 2022, 23, and beyond? The state budget should give us some guidance on that. If it does happen, we'll have to start planning for that because we will need to start looking at how do we matriculate all of those kids up? How do we have the majority of all of our kinder students basically having 2 years of kinder, right? A TK and a K. How will our enrollment recover? Our ADA, those are huge question marks that we have. And then property and liability insurance, we have not received those rate increases from RESIG yet. 2 years ago, we were roughly at $550. Now we're close to $1 million. That's a huge amount of increase in 2 year span. So it's been going up between 250 and 290,000 per year each of the last 2 years. And of course, that's due to the fires and the impacts on the insurance industry. Inflation, where's inflation? How will that impact our costs? Fortunately, we have strong general fund reserves. Our 5% that we've set aside is about, this is all as of second interim, was 5.3 million roughly. State requires 3% minimum. Many districts maintain 5 to 10% reserves. 820,000, we know South County reserves that we cannot access or use. And we have a roughly 4.2 million available over our reserves and designated balances. And so remember, the greater the reserves, the greater the liquidity for meeting our cash flow needs. Monthly payroll benefits. Our payroll runs, I think, roughly close to $4 million a month, just to give you an idea. So if he's deferring our state revenue, our cash from June to July, you can see how having that level of liquidity is super important. And then also we have 917,000 in deficit spending as a second interim, and we haven't even budgeted yet all of the raises, the management, and then hopefully when we settle for CSEA. So that's only going to go up. Multi-year projections are going to be a challenge. 22, 23, 23, 24. If we have to project reductions in enrollment, that's going to be significant. Increases in STRS and PERS, significant. Loss of that protection of 2019-20 ADA. So let's just quickly look at a couple of enrollment projections. You can see in 2020-21, this is as of month 9, so May 4th, it was our end of month 9, right? So we're back at in-person instruction, hybrid. Elementary district 1603, and I'm comparing October of 2019, so the prior year CBEDs. I'm comparing and showing you how the month 9 compared to October of 2019. You can see secondary was flat. Pengrove, again, like I said, you know, we're projecting some growth. And when you look at the next column, Cherry Valley grew a little bit. Pax grew during the year. Then look at what we're projecting for 21-22. And this is based on working with our principals and kids actually enrolling and how we staff. So these numbers are basically working with our principals and staffing for this. Elementary school district, 1618, you can see how it compares to 1603. But when you compare it to 1689, it's a decline of 71. So basically, if you look at the overall, month 9 was 7,287 compared to CBEDs of 7,377 down below. So October of 20 was 7377, and by May of 21 we were down to 7287. So that's a loss of 90 kids over that year. CBEDs October of 19 was 7521. So you can see 7521 compared to CBEDs of 19 at 7,521 compared to May of 21, 7287. That's the lowest number we've had as far back as I can look in our CBEDs. So when you look on the right side, you can see in purple, I compared October 2019 of 7521 to 7388, and that's a loss of 133 students. 133 students. That's $1.5 to $2 million in LCFF revenue. That's just on average. So that's a significant drop potentially in our revenue. Theoretically, we would need to reduce our expenditures proportionately if 2022-23 is equal to or less than 21-22, because we would then be using 21-22 ADA. I don't know if that all makes sense. And it also will depend on how often the kids are showing up. How is their attendance? Are they continuing to attend at that 95.5% to 96% level? Quickly, next steps. Continue to gather information, finalize staffing, monitor enrollment, making adjustments, reconcile position control, working with RESIG to get more information. We're in the process of finalizing the bill back for transportation and South County. And that's it. I also can show you, let me get out of this.
So I think while Chris is doing that, I think the questions for the board that you are going to, the $1 million question, literally, because it's a great budget. The budget itself is great. But the budget also is going to be potentially a cliff for some districts and not for others. So I want you to think about it as next year we're getting paid for kids that don't exist. So what's going to be really critical is at the end of October, November, when the district needs to come to the board and say, this is actually how many kids have shown up. It's all about that number. Until then, you don't know whether you're financially in good stead or not. You won't know until at that point in time. If that number is 150 kids, then we can pretty safely say that they didn't come back. We've lost that group of students. And so we just, we're in the same boat as everybody else in the state, but there's just a big asterisk. This is a nice budget for 21, 22, but if the city's paying a restaurant for customers that aren't existing and they're telling them, oh, by the way, next year, we're not paying for those customers, there's going to be a price to pay at some point.
And you can see, thanks, Gary, because you're absolutely right. And you can see here's more detailed projections, and you can see by grade level. So this goes back to 2005-06 CBEDS, 79-17 back in 2005-06. You can see it by grade level. So here is CBEDS 2020. This is October of 20, where I've just highlighted. And then this is month 73-77, which I showed you on the slide. And then you can see that drop and by grade level. Now remember, this number is the state combines TK and K. They consider all kinder. So if you look at this combined total, that equals that. But you can see by grade level how first grade has dropped, second grade has dropped, third grade has dropped, and so on and so forth. You can also see what this 100 more students I'm projecting, that 73-88 for next year over where we are right now. But then look at 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25 and beyond. Now this is all, I'm going to go in and do more detailed projections based on actual enrollment at the feeder districts, because the feeder districts drive our upper numbers. All of these numbers, I have to incorporate those all in, and I'm still working on that. But at least this gives you an indication that if our numbers don't start popping back up, and you can see these 700 in the 7th, 8th, and 9th compared to the 800s in the 10th, 11th, 12th. If these continue to be in the 700 range and we start losing the 800s, right? And now they're all in the 700 range, that's why our enrollment drops. Does that make sense? So unless we start bumping up in 7th grade and seeing more 7th graders that become 8th graders that become 9th graders, then we'll continue to see this decline in the secondary. I would also say I haven't factored in growth from development. So these are not, there's a big development going in over by the Humane Society or the shelter, large, like 300 units, very mixed types of units. That's going to feed into our schools because that's Petaluma City boundaries. It's not Old Adobe. And we're also going to see growth, I believe, in the high schools from some of the Baywood apartments and some of the other developments. All those developments were completed right as the pandemic hit. So we don't know how much those new developments will hit us. But I'm just trying to, like, worst case scenario from a budget planning perspective, this shows you why that cliff in 22, 23 might become really dramatic, because then we'll be using 21, 22 ADA to fund this. Does that make sense? And this is already down significantly from 2019-20 at 75-21. So right now, this year is driving our revenue for 2021 and 21-22, and look at the difference. So I just wanted to kind of show you visually why I'm a bit concerned about 22, 23.
Well, and again, this is just the governor's proposal. A governor who's facing a recall. So, and looking to position himself in the best way for that. So we'll see what happens in the legislative process. At some point, probably, over the summer, Chris will come back with the rest of the story, how it all finally landed once they have to obviously approve that budget in June. So there'll be more information to come on this.
And I would like to, Gary, just end this on a positive note. This is an amazing budget for us. So I just wanted, I think sometimes we get fixated either on the two positive or the two negative. This is kind of one of those whoop, whoop. This is a good budget. So I don't want to underscore a 5.07% COLA for us. That's a really positive thing. But I also think it can be hard to get a bunch of money, all the one-time money, that 13 million that we shared with you, plus this 5% COLA, new programs, and then all of a sudden come 22, 23, we have a new superintendent and stuff starts to go south. I want to kind of prepare people that it's probably not going to be Matthew's fault in a year. So
is someone recording this right now?
It is always the superintendent's fault.
I'm
already blaming Matthew.
I think just blame Gary for that.
Anyway, this is a positive budget, so I just want to underscore that. I don't want to be unbalanced in my presentation. This is a very positive thing. I also think we're a little understated because we're so tired. But I do want us to kind of prepare for 22, 23. So I'll end it on that note, Gary. He's like, phew.
Okay, thankfully Matthew's already signed his contract, so.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we were able to get back the students.
Oh, yeah, no, I heard from Michelle, no.
Okay.
So we're gonna invite them to the next meeting.
Okay.
So, all right, next up is comments. Oh, and thank you, Chris, very much. I know how much work that takes to put all that together. So actually, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
I just want to say that at the CSBA workshop webinar on Monday on the May Revise, it was just like you. It was like, this is a fabulous budget, but man, it's really not. So they're kind of mixed feelings. We're just like yours, Chris. So, a lot of one-time money that it's crazy.
And thank goodness for our strong reserves, because that's really going to help us plan and get through.
All right, any questions or comments or anything else about the budget? No. All right, thank you. So moving on to comments from the public on non-agendized items. So we are going to open the chat. I have to read the little blurb. Okay. Under government code section 54954.3a, members of the public have the right to address the governing board on any items of interest, providing it relates to the subject matter jurisdiction of the school district. While government code allows speakers to criticize the district's policies, procedures, programs, services, and/or employees, the district does have a policy specific to complaints against employees. Should comments from the public pertain to a specific district employee, the board requests that the complaint first be submitted in writing to the employee's immediate supervisor for investigation. If the comment is about something that is not on the agenda, it will be heard only during the public comment on non-agendized items, period. Once that part of the meeting is over, comments will only be taken on agenda items during the discussion of those items. The board values public comment, and although we cannot take action or discuss items not on the agenda, we listen carefully and appreciate input from the public. Public comments are subject to a 4-minute per person limit or a 20-minute limit per subject matter. So we're going to open the chat, and then Gary, you can go ahead and decide when to close it down.
And Keith, if you could add the item that you're, or a general item that you're going to speak to, so we can categorize it. Great, thank you, Keith. So let's close public comment.
Okay, so Keith, you'll be brought up, promoted to a panelist for your comment time, and you have 4 minutes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Keith Diaz. I am a business representative for the Sheet Metal Workers Local 104. I just want to have a piggyback on some of my colleagues about 2 weeks ago from the IBEW and the UA. So I kind of felt left out because I wasn't able to speak regarding my apprenticeship program. But I just, mainly want to speak on for opportunities for your students when they get out of high school, and the opportunity to get into a career in with us. It's a sheet metal industry, or HVAC, heating and air conditioning industry. We had a school in Petaluma, or was our school in Petaluma. Good news, bad news. Bad news, we had to move. Good news is we grew out of it. So we built a 45,000 square foot building in Fairfield. But we have plenty of journeymen and apprentices that attended all of your schools there in Petaluma. And I just want to offer my number, or just trying to make a connection with you folks to just collaborate. And if you have students, I know approximately 30% of your students will graduate with a 4-year degree. What do we do with the other 70%? Send them to us. We're looking for people that are willing to learn and work hard and to be into the trades, because they're not shipping our jobs overseas. And pretty much all of our training is free, and it's earn as you learn. So just kind of promote the apprenticeship, whether it's sheet metal workers or the IBEW, electrical workers, or the plumbers or carpenters. It's a very viable option for your students. So I just here to put that little plug in. And if anybody wants my information, I'll put my email in the chat. And if anybody wants to talk, comment, we'll do a career fair, talk to your classes, anything like that. Just not here to sell anything, just to promote our industry, because I'm getting very tired of being called the best kept secret of getting into the trade. So we hear that a lot. And we do attend the CSBA every year, except for last year, but I hope to see you next year in person at the CSBA. So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Okay, next up, report on activities and correspondence of school board members. Circle Up, Budget Advisory Committee, Curriculum Audit Meeting, K12 Curriculum Meeting, Site Visit to Petaluma High School, CHIPA, Tour of McNear River Park with Acting Director Matt Stone, District Retirement Party, Relief Petaluma Project Meeting, and the SCO Budget Perspectives Workshop on the May revision. All right, so now we're gonna have comments from the public on consent items. So same policy as before. We're gonna open the chat. Please put your first and last name and the subject that you would like to speak about.
We will close consent public comment.
Okay, it looks like first up we have Sal.
Hello. Sal Andropoulos, they and them pronouns with North Bay LGBTQI families and Petaluma Tide. I just wanted to comment regarding the Circle Up agreement on the agenda. Just want to first thank PCS for the dedication and focus to working on these issues and for considering making this investment in creating safer and more equitable learning environments for all students through this agreement that would extend over the next couple of years. And so just very appreciative of all of the work that has gone into building that. Just wanted to sort of, echo some of the discussion from the last board meeting. Just want to also, in that process, urge the district as much as possible, in this process to, center the experiences and voices of marginalized, youth and students, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+ students, and others who most frequently experience harassment or an unsafe school environment due to race, gender, or other marginalized identities. And also just to continue looking at information from, the multiple sources that it has kind of come in from on these topics, such as, the Dear CASA, Dear PHS Instagram accounts, the community events that, and other just reports that we have heard, over time of, students feeling, unsafe on campus, experiencing overt, kind of, harassment or discrimination, and just kind of certainly I understand that there are, some things fall within the purview of the Circle Up work and some things don't, but just kind of to the extent that they can be incorporated or aligned with that work, just the, continued focus on finding safe and anonymous reporting, for things like Title VI, Title IX violations, and just continuing to move forward in related areas that, again, maybe outside sort of the scope of Circle Up's work, but that are fundamentally connected in terms of curriculum, professional development that supports that curriculum implementation, such as, ethnic studies, FAIR Act compliant coursework that really kind of needs that professional development piece in order for the material to be presented and taught in a supportive and culturally conscious manner. So again, just really appreciate the district and the board's work and commitment to just kind of continuing the work on these issues and for the updates and information and just the dedication and commitment to centering the marginalized student voices first and foremost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sal. And that was our only comment on consent agenda. So we will move on to the consent agenda. So adoption and approval of consent agenda by consolidated motion. You're muted, Maddie.
I so move.
Second.
To approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. All right, questions, comments, anyone?
I have a question about Circle Up. Nonprofit worker here, very, very familiar of how nonprofits are strapped for cash, but the amount of spending on cue cards seems a little much. And even if not, I just don't get why we would spend it 2 years in a row. Like, why can't we just keep them? So if anyone has insight on that.
I have
the same question about the cue card. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so the cue cards that we have so far were for the 40 practitioners that Ellen has them up in front of her. The idea was to make them available to every staff member who gets trained next year. And so we were going to train all of our 450 teachers. Again, I can always, I'll leave it up to you, but the idea of the cue cards is so that teachers can just have them handy when they want to run a circle in the class and do sort of icebreaker relationship building activities with students. They have their own set.
That totally makes sense. So then I personally don't think we need to do another 410 the second year, because hopefully we're not going to lose all 450 of our teachers.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I know what you're saying now. Yes, in year 2, Tiffany and I talked about it. And so she said the same thing. You're not going to need cue cards again. So should I just, but it can be a buffer for any other work that you want to end up doing. Like if you want more student focus groups or anything else. So that money would then be spent, not for cue cards over again, but just placed aside for something else that we can add into the contract in year 2. We just hadn't built the contract 2 years out because we don't know exactly what they're going to be. We're not going to buy cue cards all over again. it's just a line item holding a place for what we might need in year 2.
So that would also be the case with the design book.
That is the case with the design book
Okay,
as well.
so those two things together are thousands of dollars. So I
Yes.
could see where that would be helpful.
Yes,
Okay,
no,
good.
I talked about it with Tiffany. We talked about running additional student focus groups, board presentations, just using that money elsewhere, but we just don't know 2 years out what it might be used for. We're not going to buy more binders and more cue cards in the second year.
So I had thought that there was going to be like a plan presented, and I didn't see a plan with this. Just the amounts.
So if you look to the left of the amounts, it says exactly what the sessions will be about and how many sessions will focus on those and how many teachers, or rather how many staff members will be trained on each of those topics. So there's 3 different sessions that are full faculty for 450 teachers, one around restorative practices, one around implicit bias, and one around circle building. And then there's 8 sessions for our 40 practitioners who are going to take a deeper dive into the actual facilitation and training others on facilitation.
I think I was looking for something more in depth because I do recall her saying that there was going to be more of a student focus, and I didn't see that in any of this summary here. It looks like it's still like training the trainers and having to do with staff and the adults, but I don't see anything related to students.
That was my my also. I'll go after you answer, Joanne.
Well, training the adults is working with the students. So we're working with those practitioners. This year, they went in and ran circles with staff as a starter. Next year, as the practitioners are getting this training, they can run circles with staff and ideally with students as issues arise. That's sort of but Circle Up isn't working. Outside of focus groups that they can run, which they did this year. They're not, like Tiffany's not going in and facilitating student circles. She's training staff to go in and facilitate student circles. Our staff.
I don't see that. Can you point me in that direction? I'm just seeing like with each other, but I don't see like teachers will be trained or staff will be trained to run circles with students.
Yeah, let me pull open my proposal. Give me a minute.
So you want to, it sounds like you're looking for some clear delineation of regarding the student focus portion of it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. And then, also just like looking over, no, go ahead.
Well, why don't we bring that one back as an addendum to it so we can flesh out more specifically what that looks like.
Just because, after looking at, I don't know if Cliff, it was you, someone gave me access to the Youth Truth information, and just like there's just such a divide. Like you'd see like staff are like 90%, 95% think there's great engagement and culture. And then students, it's like only 55%. So I'm still seeing like this big divide in how our students are perceiving our campuses versus our adults. Okay. And so I think I'm like looking for that more explicitly. And I thought I recalled Tiffany saying that was going to be in the plan or the proposal for us to vote on today.
Yeah, that was my understanding, I think.
So just looking at the screen share, the one that the full staff is getting training on that they can move into their classrooms is around relationships, building trust, exploring values. That's why they're getting the cue card. So all of our faculty are learning how to design circles for students in their classroom. So that's that piece. So if they have an issue, if they're building relationship, that's going to be across the board, and that training is happening first thing in August. So that one impacts students directly. And then then they're getting trained on, conscious conversations, implicit bias. But then the other is for our practitioners, and they're doing incident assessment practice. Incident assessment is typically for students. So if there's been harm done between two students, between staff and students, or even between staff and staff. That's what that incident assessment work is. So it's addressing the situation, preventing bias from impacting the practice, and doing conflict resolution. So that one also, it's training our practitioners on that skill specifically. Mindful meetings practice, again, that would be something we could use with staff and staff, or staff and students, or students and students, for low to medium intensity conflicts that are happening in the classroom or on our campuses. And then sessions 5 to 8 is just development coaching. So that's for them, the trainers, to be able to work more deeply with teachers and staff on running these in their classroom. So I'm not sure. I mean,
well, I think what we need to do is let's do this. Let's pull the item.
Okay.
And I think what should happen should be an ad hoc group from the board should have a conversation with Tiffany, with you, so we can flesh out whatever the particulars are that we need to make sure gets in the plan. I think it's what I'm hearing is a desire that unless we're really intentional in naming it, is it actually going to happen, whatever that is? And so I think that, we can, board president, you can decide, what other trustee to work with Liz, but I think you guys can meet, and conference in with Circle Up, and then we'll just bring it back to the next meeting.
I mean, I do have some other questions. Should I ask at that meeting or now? I just, I don't want this to like continually be pulled. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of extra work for Liz. It's just so it can all be addressed when it's brought back.
Right. I would lay it out with Circle Up and Liz at that time. See if we can get them all addressed.
Can we bring it back then at the next meeting?
Yeah. And
not delay it? I mean, just because I'm in agreement with Joanna that, we need to, that a lot of this is really good and substantive, and we need to I think we need to go forward with it. But I do have, I guess I had a misunderstanding about the student voices and their representation in developing our plan. And so it was, the students that were represented were amazing, but there were so few. And we have all these students who are very active in a lot of different ways and asking for this change. And I just don't feel that that's in this anywhere, if that makes sense. It's like combining it with our diversifying our curriculum. That's being driven by our students.
Right.
It's being driven by Circle Up and not by our community. Does that make sense?
It does. It sounds to me like trying to look at it from a third perspective. It sounds to me like there's just there's a missing piece. It's not that the pieces that are in place are not, because we're trying to do a trainer of trainers model and build capacity so that ultimately we're responsible for maintaining a culture that's going to have these really high point values to it. But there's a student lens piece here that it sounds like that needs, you want to have more discussions about. What does it look like specifically for the students?
Yeah.
Because year 2, there's still so many. I mean, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg on this thing with a small group, and now it's expanding it out to teachers. So what role the students play in that? I think it needs to be, sounds like you want that to be further fleshed out. What does that interaction look like? So maybe it's a bigger pie than even what's, it might be a bigger fiscal impact than even what's here.
I mean, I would like to, just because, if only 2 of us can be on the ad hoc, if you want everyone to have their concerns addressed and their questions answered. So does anyone else have any questions or comments about this?
This contract would start, I mean, it starts in the academic year. So we're talking about July 1.
Yes.
So having this come back up on the next board meeting won't make a difference in terms of when this starts. So I'm good with that.
And then I did have sorry, Sheldon, did you have something else? I had a budget question as well, because I saw Circle Up referenced in the ELO grant. So how's this being funded?
In the ELO grant. That was, yeah, because it is
okay.
Social emotional learning, addressing student needs and students in crisis.
And I assume you did like that equitably, you have like a percentage based on enrollment, or how, like, what's the piece of the pie that they're funding?
You'll see, Cliff is presenting on the whole ELO plan and that entire budget later, but essentially ELO can cover these Circle Up contracts in full for, and it goes, to Mary Collin, to the charter schools, to the high school district, and to the elementary school district is all apportioned out.
Okay.
I just want to thank you, Liz, for sticking with this, and for all the staff that worked with you, for the teachers and staff that came forward and worked on this. Their presentation was, really moving for me last time, and that people were so willing to take up the challenge of this work that's so hard, especially for this old white woman. So, my hat is off to you, and I thank you for sticking with it. And, and for all the people that participated in any way to move us forward in some way. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and I thank the participants. They've done a great job. So what I can do then is, Joanna, I'll just reach out to you separately and set up a meeting with you and one other of the board representatives and Tiffany, and we can talk about all these questions.
Okay.
I think you're going to want to consider once you get into the second phase of this, because there's probably 5 phases at least in all of this, phases in different years, where it's going to take that long to really start to build this out. But I think probably sometime in the second phase, which is the next year, and maybe in the late winter, early spring, you may want to consider doing a study session with the board, with the trainers that have done a deep dive, and what are the issues that they're seeing, and really spend 3 or 4 hours, and because this is going to be a constant training and then assessing, training and assessing, and you're going to take 2 steps forward, you're going to take 1 step backwards, right? And I think that until you actually hit some level of discomfort on these items, you don't know what you don't know, right? It's like when I've said before that it's easy to say that you're student-centered until you have to make decisions that are student-centered, that maybe not are in the best interests of adults. But so I think that there's going to be a really critical time in all of this where you can do a really nice process check for purposes of moving forward into that next phase, whatever that is. So just food for thought on that.
No, I appreciate that, because after the last presentation, I would like to hear from them more often, to hear how it's going, to hear from the trainers, just so we can get an idea of where the program's going. I had some other questions too. like the people who are the trainers, like, are they teachers? Are they admin? Like, how will this impact their day? Like, if there's like a conflict, like,
so we have we have students, classified, certificated administrators, a board member. So there's a whole cadre of people. So if we need to pull someone, and they've all been trained to work across sites. So there's always someone, I mean, Molly and I are both trained, Ellen Webster's trained. So, if all else fails and we can't find anyone, we're all facilitators and trained facilitators as well at this point. So we have, there's 40 of us in total, and we can always pull from someone to go to a site and help with a conflict as needed.
Okay. All right. Anything else before we move on to any other questions about the consent agenda?
I move to pull item 10.2.2 from the consent agenda. Is that what we want to do?
Yeah, right.
I'll second if we have to.
Do we vote on that now?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda?
I move to adopt the amended consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay, moving on to comments from the public on action items. So same process, first and last name, the topic that you want to speak towards. And Gary, I'll let you decide when to close it.
We can't go back and comment on consent items. So we've got 10.2.3. This is just on action items.
So Keith, can you email us your comment? Because we've already approved that, that item.
Okay, we'll close the chat.
Okay, so we have Sal speaking about ELO grants. And you have 4 minutes, Sal.
Hello. Hi again, Sal, Andropoulos, they, them, pronouns with North Bay LGBTQI families and Petaluma Tide. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly comment regarding the ELO grant plans that are being discussed tonight. And so as we can see in the documents, and as has been discussed in many of the prior meetings, certainly a big focus for PCS and for a lot of districts certainly moving forward from this year is in allocating pandemic response funds will be on addressing both learning losses and the social emotional impacts of the pandemic, which have certainly been pretty significant for so many students. And wanted to highlight that, I mean, certainly under any circumstances, school climate's a really big part of the social emotional sort of piece, particularly for marginalized students such as BIPOC, LGBTQIA+. And additionally, addressing learning losses is something that it's important to approach, I think, in a manner that is culturally conscious and serves to facilitate the ability of all families to navigate the system in relation to things like, finding out about credit recovery options and things like that. And so certain, kind of just some of the initiatives that have come up sort of like in the LCAP process and other facilitate this would be, things like funding a bilingual community or family engagement coordinator at each school site, and also implementing expanded, equity and inclusion initiatives related to both school climate as well as curriculum. So it's great to hear that the ELO funds are going to be going to the Circle Up process. And also, again, just making the learning environment one where BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and other student groups can see, reflections of their identities through the coursework, as well as professional development for things like ethnic studies coursework, Fair Act implementation, LGBTQIA+ affirming family life and sex ed curriculum that's compliant with the California Healthy Youth Act, which requires that sexual health education be appropriate for use with students of all genders and sexual orientations, supporting, GSAs at both the elementary and secondary levels. And so just a number of, many of these things that I think have come up in previous meetings. And so just, again, great to see that the Circle Up process will be incorporated in the ELO grant plans, it sounds like, building a learning environment. I think a big part of, student wellness is building a learning environment where all identities are reflected and celebrated. So that's, really happy to see the focus on that, and just would encourage, continued sort of efforts in that area with regard to pandemic response funds, both ELO and the other groups of funding that will become available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sal. I think Sal was our only commenter. All right. Item 12.1.1. This is you, Matthew.
Yep, sorry, let me get back. So this resolution, we're eliminating a 0.4, I'm sorry, it's a classified position. It is a site PTA funded position. The PTA has advised they'll no longer be funding the position. So it's not about the person, it's this particular position that's a site funded position.
So this is a student advisor, and how, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
Well, it seemed, I'm kind of confused about this because I know the ELO funding is going to be, part of it's going to be used for that's exact kind of position. Yep. So, and this person obviously in this position knows the students, knows the school. So right. I'm just kind of confused.
Yeah. So Ellen, I hear exactly, I hear what you're saying. I can see how it's very confusing. So McNear Elementary School, their PTA has over the past several years has funded it's a position. They're funding it, right? So what they're telling us is we can't fund this anymore. We don't want to fund this anymore. So we're eliminating that site funded position. This ELO funding, if you've gone through it, they're looking at bringing back some more of these positions. So they very well may have another position at the school site. In fact, I'm assuming that they're going to. This is particular to the the McNair PTA site funded position that we're eliminating.
So this position will probably come back at that site, and it could be that same person who already knows the students. And
from what I'm seeing in the ELO funding, some of the ideas, I would say it looks like it's very possible. Yeah.
How many positions is this? How many?
One position. They have one site funded position.
Do we have assurance though that the ELO is going to fund the student advisor there? Because we don't want them to be left without one, right? Like we're trying to add student advisors. I think that's the concern.
Yeah. And I think from, Cliff, feel free to jump in, Cliff or Chris.
Well, I think these are standard protocols that we follow, and I think it is confusing because of the ELO, but we also have to sort and separate funding sources and what positions are funded by what things. Remember, this person will have bumping rights. So the minute we restore a position using federal or state funds, this person has rights to get that level of job back. And so they would be the first in line. That we do this every spring. Every spring we reach out to our foundations or our PTAs that are supporting positions, and we say, can you provide us with an assurance letter for this position? Cherry Valley has several, for example. And then they give us a commitment letter that says, yes, we're committed to funding this position. And there are times in this particular year, McNair's PTA says, said, no, we're not going to fund this position any longer. And so it's our standard protocol to then put that position, that PTA funded position on a RIF or a reduction in force based on that categorical funding. And that starts a clock. The person has 60 days in which they're in paid status. And then as we go through our budgeting and our planning process for the ELO, and we start restoring these positions, this person will be the first in line to get that position restored. So this is a standard protocol, just like certificate staff on March 15th. A lot of times we're having to give them preliminary notice, knowing we're going to get, they're not going to get final notice in May.
So even though this is a PTA funded position, that person still has hiring rights?
They have bumping rights, yes. Okay. They go in the 39-month rehire, just like any other classified staff member. So they would have rights to a position the minute we restore that position.
They have bumping rights. This is not about the person. This is about the site funded position. And it's also not about those ELO funds could very well be used. I mean, I've been part of some of the planning meetings talking about bringing some more of the student advisor position back to support students. This person could go right into one of those positions. This is just specifically to say McNair's PTA saying, no, we're not funding this position next year. It could be district funded or through COVID-19 funds, ELO funding. But
and we have to follow. We have to follow this process and you're going to see more of this because frankly, as we re-envision through the ELO planning process, less campus supervisors and more student advisors. We may have vacant campus supervisor positions that we have to go through the process of doing a reduction in force for those so we can add them over in this category over here. Those people may apply and get those jobs, but we have to go through this process to make sure that we've documented that this position has gone away.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
So I'll move to approve resolution 2021-28.
Ellen seconded, but she's muted.
So is Maddie, who's also muted.
Girls.
You second, Ellen? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure Michelle gets that.
I'm unmuted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, next up, 12.2.1.
I move to approve 12.2.1, approval of resolution 2021-29.
Any questions, comments? Okay, all right. I guess we're ready to vote. All in favor?
Well, we can talk about it after.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions or comments about it?
No, thank goodness for their insurance.
It's going to be a very busy campus at Kenilworth this summer. That's all I can say because they have to pull those solar panels off in order to repair the roofs, and we're doing a new HVAC project on 2 or 3 of the buildings there that aren't impacted. They have the different roofs than these roofs, so it's going to be a very active campus construction wise.
Is that the newest campus in our, oh, I'm sorry, Ellen.
I'm
well, I was
sorry.
just going to say this is a long time coming. I mean, we've been talking about this for what, 2 years?
And it's our newest campus.
Go ahead, Maddie. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say it's our newest campus. Or is San Antonio?
Here's the thing. Technology in the solar PV photovoltaic area has changed so dramatically since 2004-05.
Yeah.
And Kenilworth, to its credit, the district, to its credit, was on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Some people refer to that as the bleeding edge of technology. And you know what I mean? When you're beta testing certain technologies, sometimes it works really well. In this case, I think it probably was a technology they realized was one that was quickly not used any longer. So anyway, but the good news is, Greenbacker is standing behind it and their insurance company is standing behind it. And we're going to get the solar taken off and get the roofs repaired. And then the next phase will be talking about replacing the solar and how do we do that?
I was about to ask, that solar must be at the end of its life if it's.
Well, they're not going to put it back.
Yeah.
They're not going to put it back. So the next conversation, once we get the roofs repaired and we get the new HVAC on the buildings that they're going on, we're going to start talking about solar PV. Do we do it under a power purchase agreement? Do we do it like it exists right now? Or do we do it through our bond measure? How do we replace it? So that will be the next phase of this ongoing saga.
It's epic.
But the good news is the teachers are getting new mechanical systems. I mean, that's been a long time coming too. They've been complaining about, Joanna, you must know, you were there. They've been complaining about these systems since I got here. I've been hearing about it. And so, but every building is different and it's complicated. There wasn't a one size fits all solution for the school. We've literally had to engineer building by building the solutions. So.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's nice to see it starting to come to a resolution. So, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Cliff, Ed Services, 12.3.
Yeah, I'm going to actually start it and then I'm going to pass it to Cliff. So this is just the beginning of the process on this. As far as the expanded learning, we want to make sure we get the money. And the way that we have to complete this process, the grant plan, is really more at the 10,000 foot level. It's not at the ground zero level at this point. There'll be a lot of work to do, but I want to talk about the basic construct and the structure around what we believe we need to do that's in the best interest of our students. And so, pull this up. So I want you to imagine, we know for a fact, because we heard about it at the study session, that even prior to the pandemic, we were having issues with meeting all of the social emotional needs of our students. Just talking with our MFTs on that. We also know that we had, prior to the pandemic, that we had students that had very specific targeted academic needs that needed to be met. And so this plan needs to identify both. And the critical word in all of this is expanded. It is supposed to be an expanded learning opportunities plan beyond what you're already doing. So that's not supplanting what you're doing. It needs to be beyond what you're doing. And so the spirit of the work that's going to need to be done from this point forward is, what does that expansion look like? And we know that it's our responsibility in this, whether a student has academic needs or social emotional needs, we need to be able to provide targeted support by name. We need to know who those students are, and we need to know what their needs are. So the process has to be able to identify students by name, by need, looking at it from a case management perspective. And so that really floats the first essential question, which is, okay, so how are you going to do that? How are you going to case manage by name, by need? Knowing that we already have a system in place, our 8-3 system in place is not really designed to do what it's doing now and also pick this up seamlessly. And so what we're looking at is this partnership, case management partnership between the school site and a wellness center. And the wellness center, when we're talking about a wellness center, we're not just talking about social emotional services. We're talking about expanded academic services for students, because we know they're so directly linked. And those services, those expanded services, there will be some very specific school day support. And when I say school day support, basically 8-3 support. But there'll also be some very specific after school or PM support, so that we are truly providing opportunities for students to get their social emotional needs met, both during the day and also up and through the PM hours. Same with the academic piece. So this is a very different way of looking at this, knowing that you know, at the end of this, what the board should be able to see once a plan is fleshed out in the specifics to it, is you should be able to very easily point out what the expansion looks like for students. What is it that's being put in place that doesn't currently exist? So with that, I'll pass it to Cliff, and he'll kind of go over the domains of an ELO plan.
Right. So I think Gary's explanation there is a great way to look at it overall. We're trying to meet the academic and social emotional needs of the students. The biggest things we're looking to do is case manage, and then also put into play a wellness center. And there's lots of pieces that go into that, but that's where we plan to spend the bulk of the money. So if you looked at each of the plans, and I'm going to speak to the plan overall, because there are 4 plans, but they're just each school's percentage of the total plan. So I think the voting should be easy as you go down, because it's just the same info. But the majority of the money is in an area that they're calling integrated student support. So that's where the wellness center would live, and additional mental health staff, additional academic support. So on all of the plans, that's where the bulk of the money is spent. So the plan asked for us to address 7 categories. The plan divided, expanded learning opportunities into 7 areas. You don't have to spend funds in every area. That's just the way they categorized it. So we took that plan, that idea, that visual that Gary shared, and made it fit into the right buckets. But his visual is the best way to kind of think about what we're doing.
One more thing, Cliff, before you start, because I don't want to get people looking at this from the wrong perspective. When we're talking about a wellness center, we're not talking about, for the purpose of our plan, we're not talking about a physical location that kids go to get all better. We're talking about a concept of students to be successful students and successful citizens need to be emotionally healthy, and they need to be healthy with their academics. And we need to be able to provide support for both of those areas. And so the concept of a center is really, we had difficulty landing on this term, the term center, because that has a certain loaded word term. But really what we're talking about is a wellness philosophy. If that's a better way to look at it, is that we're looking at our students and saying, okay, you just went through 15, 16 of the most difficult months of your life. And so now where are you? And how can we help you get through and be successful and thrive? And thus the wellness concept is what we're driving towards. So
where is this person going to be housed though? Like at the district office? The coordinator?
There's a number of options that we have available as far as potential locations. It could be in reality, it's more than one person. There's a number of people that make up this, and so we see them moving around from site to sites, depending on where we actually land on. We haven't gotten to that location.
Yeah, I would just want it to be crystal clear for parents and students, like, to know like how to access this person or these persons. Because again, just going back to the data that we have, like, it seems like people still aren't sure how to access all of our resources.
So I guess another way is going back to the initial slide that I showed you, when you're talking about where is the wellness center, well, during the school day, it's at their school. The during the day activities and a lot of the right after school activities will be at their school. It may be that there might be some PM activities that are at multiple locations if families need additional support. And so those locations will need to be fleshed out as part of the plan. It won't show up in this presentation.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right. So we began brainstorming, with several groups and came up with a number of ideas. And then we also surveyed certificated classified staff along with students and parents and said, here are some of the ideas that have come out so far in these areas. What are your thoughts on these? And do you have any other ideas? And the response from staff, students, and parents overall, definitely a lot of support for adding tutorial support outside the school day, whether that's online, whether that's people in person, more math support, more reading support. So a lot of the things that we kind of threw out there in the brainstorm, we then used these results to help us kind of nail down what we wanted to put in this plan. And when we started to price out and kind of estimate what some of these things might cost, or if we increased, nurse staffing, or we increased MFT staffing, or we increased other things, we started to cost out what things would look like. We had well over $6 million of things on the list, and there's only 4.8 that need to be articulated in this plan. So then we had to say, like, okay, those are good ideas. Let's put those aside. The other funds that we're getting to do some of those things. So they're not off the list. They're just not in this plan because, we only had to articulate the money that we're getting in this plan. One of those things we talked about extending either the school year or the school day, that fiscally is not budgeted in this plan. So that's another 1.2 million-ish, if that's something we consider later. So that would have to be talked about, negotiated, and figured out, but that's not in this plan. The idea is, but the money is not. So in the first section, extending learning time, what's in there is the cost for our expanded K2 elementary direct reading support summer school for both this summer and next summer. So because the funds can be spent through August of 2022, that allows us to do 2 summer schools. So that's where the elementary summer school money is. I think in the PCS plan that was, roughly around 604,000. So that's what's in that category. In the accelerating progress to close learning gaps category, what we have in there is additional reading specialist / PM support. So Gary talked about that outside the 8-to-3 model, potentially having folks in the PM available. Also bringing in math specialists, especially at the elementary level, similar to what we do with reading specialists that would have a caseload and be able to serve students. So those projected costs are in that category. There are some other things in that category that we already have and use supplemental funds for, so it's no cost, but it would fit right in there using, for example, our Illuminate system as part of our MTSS to identify students who need, who have academic needs. And then the bulk of the money, as I mentioned, is in the category of integrated student supports to address other barriers to learning. So this is where we have, you were talking about earlier, increased student advisor staffing. The plan is supposed to also provide for snacks in addition to just student meals. So we have some budgeted costs in there. Potentially increasing nurse staffing was in here. Ultimately, that's not one of the things that the ELO is going to fund. That could be something that comes up later. But the bulk of this area is the wellness idea, the wellness / responsive intervention program. So we did talk about having a coordinator and then 2 academic specialists, one for elementary, one for secondary, and then also an SEL specialist. So that group would basically, case manage and make sure that the students that we've identified by name and by need, we're coordinating services to those students. So we're kind of at the site level, and then at whatever this is, wherever this is, wherever these people are, they're coordinating and ensuring that kids are getting the right services and they're getting connected to the right services, and families know about the services. And then there's 10% of the ELO funds have to be used for increasing paraprofessional staff. So we have identified here adding paraprofessional tutors to the tune of $480,000. So that's, you know, about 10 positions in the district plan, and then portions of that in each of the schools' plans.
Are these going to be existing employees?
They could be, but it's supposed to, again, it's supposed to be expanded. So we're adding positions that didn't necessarily exist before. It's certainly open to anyone who's currently working, which would then open an opening. So it's meant to be in addition to.
Okay, I'll save my questions for after. Go ahead, Cliff.
Okay, sorry. And then we also talked about increasing our behavior specialist support. Currently, we just have the one position, and we'd like to increase that. We also have built in here adding elementary school counselors, a portion of each of the schools, and then increasing, there's some assessment supports for students with disabilities. So like increasing our school psych staffing and some of our non-public agency extra hires. So that's kind of the bulk of the academic and social emotional kind of response plan. I don't know, Joanna, do you want to ask your question now before I move on to the other category?
I mean, I got questions about a lot of it, so just keep
Okay.
going. I think I'll
right.
just ask our questions at the end. Go ahead.
Okay, next area, community learning hubs. We didn't budget any money here. The idea here was if you could have used some of this money to set up a place where families and students could come and have access to technology if they don't at home. We didn't put any funds here. Credit deficient students, this is obviously specific to high school. So this is where the high school summer school costs for this summer and next summer come in, as well as some credit recovery sections at the comprehensives outside the school day next year. And then the additional academic services, we don't have anything budgeted there. And then the last area is training. So that's where the circle up costs are, as well as some instructional PD, as well as training we would, we would seek out or provide for the additional student advisors. So in gist, that's kind of where we've budgeted out, where we think we're going to spend these ELO funds. So I'll open it up to any questions, or let's see how specific I can get, because a lot of this is just kind of an idea of what we think we want to do. We are planning on moving forward, once this plan gets approved, on posting some of these positions, especially the wellness, in some of these areas where we've either new positions or we're increasing staffing in certain areas. So questions?
Go ahead, Sheldon. I see you're unmuted.
I'm guessing I know where you're going to go with this, Joanna, but I guess one question I have is about the sustainability of this, because these are expanded opportunities, and we're talking about personnel. So can you speak about, what is the expectation from the state in sustainability of this?
I think I can speak to that. It's not sustainable. Our goal should be to throw some, what we know are some effective practices that we're not employing right now, into our system, and then determine which ones we're getting the most growth from. And there will be some positions there, some of these practices that may end up bumping something else out of the budget 2 years down the road, because it's shown to be extremely effective. But there's no sustainability plan on this. It's designed to attempt to make up for learning loss or to make up for trauma, associated with what's happened with COVID. But they've been very clear it's one-time monies.
I remember in an earlier board meeting, I think it was Liz talking about, a wellness coordinator being a grant writer, to help make this more sustainable. Because even though this funding is to address COVID, we here in Sonoma, have such systemic what am I going for? Crises, with our wildfires and droughts and a lot of sources of stress for our students, as we see in all the surveys that are coming out. So anyway, I appreciate that transparency that this is not sustainable, but I love the idea of investing in a person who can go find those funds to make this sustainable, because I do think we're so vulnerable in this area to these kinds of needs.
So I will add, there are other funds coming our way that are outside this ILO, but again, they're temporary too. So we're talking about, we have funds now for the next 2 to 3 years, and then all of these end. So, we could potentially limp along an additional year with some of that. But Gary's right. I mean, but if you think about it, the credit deficiency need right now is definitely increased as opposed to normal years. So should summer school at the high school look bigger? Yes. Are there 570 kids who filled out applications? Yes. Is that need going to be there every summer? No. So that's something that'll come back down normally. The social emotional need will probably, it's definitely peaked now. Will that come back down somewhat? Probably. Should we include in our LCAP discussions some additional support to hopefully continue these things? Maybe the wellness idea. Sure, those things can continue, but like Gary said, it'd be, what else are we doing that we would then bump to then do some of these things to continue them with some of the funding we have normally and not one-time funds?
But we don't have currently, we don't have a system in place to that. For example, if you asked me, who are the kids that are struggling right now, kinder through, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Who are the kids that are struggling right now, TK through 6th grade as an example? I couldn't tell you that. Or if you said, who are the kids that need social emotional services in 7th through 12th grade? I couldn't tell you that. This should address that issue. We should be able to, because it's really about case management, and it's also about partnering with the school. So some of these pieces we think are going to be able to be sustained at some level moving forward, the structure of it. But a lot of the positions, unless we find, different grant sources, it'll be difficult.
We're going to have a better idea of how many kids and stuff after the PD day, because that's what they're going to be spending time, is identifying all those kids.
Yeah.
And then we should have a better idea.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, we'll have families that'll self-identify as well, because they're going to see, if they haven't already, they may see things in their sons and daughters that they're concerned about. And so we don't, it'll continue to be an issue. But I think what the difference is, there are not necessarily assigned people specifically to be a student advocate for the student that's been identified. And that's the difference. And that's what we're talking about when we say an academic specialist and a social emotional specialist. We haven't come up with a better word at this point, but it's the people that okay, they got on a list. Now what? somebody
Yeah.
needs to be able to carry that heavy lifting forward using the resources that we currently have, some of the people that we currently are, but also, with the additional individuals that we're going to bring in under the fold. And we think because it'll be much more close monitoring and case managing, we're going to be able to come back and have a group that's going to be able to come back to the board and say, yeah, these 3 things really did work quite well for our kids, for kids that were struggling with reading at the elementary. These 3 things worked really well. These things, not so much. Or at least we couldn't really determine whether it made much of a difference.
Will families know how to self-identify and get their students the help that they need?
Yeah. So as we develop this out, obviously, we will then share out, with our families and schools exactly what is it that we're providing. What are these additional resources? We're going to start, like you said, Ellen, we're going to start on the PD day. The morning is going to be when teachers help us begin to review their class, lists to help us identify students with particular academic needs, particular social emotional concerns from their point of view, to kind of start getting some of that info. Obviously, we do other things on top of that. We can do reports about, grades and credit deficiency and report cards and things like that. But we're going to start there by identifying the need. And then as we build out this wellness, idea over the summer and hire staff, and kind of the funds also is potentially bringing in a consultant who's done something like this before to help us build it out. So clearly a communication plan will be part of this, sharing it out with everyone on what exactly the services are, how can students be supported if they're not already identified, if parents, see something and want to alert us to that and need some additional help, that'll be part of it too.
I just concerned because we only have this money for 1 or 2 years, and like we're creating all these new positions, like the academic specialist and the social emotional specialist. I don't know if that would be redundant if we also have the wellness coordinator, because if the students end up, like, let's say we do end up having a list, then couldn't that wellness coordinator just go to the people who are already employed by us, right? Our counselors, MFTs. Like, do we really need a separate, like, other person to then go to those people on campus? I guess I'm just worried about us creating so many positions. And
well, you need to
that way.
You need to have somebody that, because a lot of these services there will be a portion of these services that will be other nonprofits in the community will be providing that level of support. So you need to have someone that's coordinating the services, the services for the student population at large, and ensuring that we have adequate case management loads for those employees so that it's consistent across the board. Like, for example, that elementary school sites are seeing the same numbers of students for their reading support, for their language support, or for MFT services. Academic specialists are the ones that are actually working specifically with the principals and those students and those services related to it. But there's got to be somebody to coordinate it. See, nobody currently, we don't have a case management model. That's the problem. If you're going to move to a case management model by name, by need, you have to have somebody to case manage it. We don't have that right now. So who would that be?
Well, who is it now? Right? Like, so if there's a kid who's like failing, then who's that fall to? There's got to be someone right now, right? Who's already
the principal at the elementary level, and the academic counselor but that I don't know if that we don't have case by case students that we're tracking. We don't.
A whole other
have-
issue. Why not? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's why we're doing that. I mean, this would help start that whole process, start rethinking it, maybe.
But then I like worry once this year or two is over, then these kids by name, by need, just their needs just aren't met anymore? Like, I guess I'm just looking at the long term.
Well, the long term, I'll tell you what it
them in 3 years.
Right. So I will tell you that in districts that I have worked in previously, well, I'll talk about specifically me. So when I was a principal at a school that was large, 1,400 students, I had a room that was only accessible to a couple people. And we had a big board of our students and that we were the most concerned about and what services they were receiving. And we checked in regularly. There was a process that we went through to make sure that they were getting the services they need. I haven't seen that here. So to put something like that into place, a case management service delivery model, you need somebody to be able to come in and show people how to do that. And that's where these individuals come into play, because this is it's not specific just for like an academic specialist to do that. They're doing it with the principal. But with many of our principals, we have brand new principals. Most of our principals have been here for less than 3 years. They have to learn that process of what that looks like. Once they learn that process, they can do that work themselves. But it's not something that unless you had experience in that in some previous life, you wouldn't know necessarily how to go about doing that. So that's our challenge. And we don't have we were looking at this district has not had a history of having robust data. And so you need data to be able to determine what the needs are. That's why this data is so critical, the ones that's coming out right now at the end of May, because we need to have something to start with students, And so it's a very, like the process that we have right now on the other end with Nikki, Jackson, and Linda, that is very organic. There's not a structure to that either. And we need to have a very specific structure to go through so that we can that we can really truly monitor, how many kids should be on, each caseload. How do we prioritize which kids are being seen, all of those pieces. So it really is, honestly, it's looking at this ELA work at developing a system to do case management of and doing intervention work, which doesn't exist. It just doesn't.
How much building a system can help. I mean, I've seen it at the nonprofits I've worked at, like the before and after, just the amount of FaceTime, for example, advocates at Verity got to have with survivors before and after our system was created. Like it's a bunch of unsexy work for a year or two, but then training people on how to use it. But yeah, I mean, it won't overall solve the fact that our therapists and academic counselors have ridiculously high caseloads and that we don't have funding for them. But it should make their lives a little less stressful and mean that teachers don't have to be case managers that are getting texts from students at 10 p.m.
Yeah, so there are some tools we have currently that we're using supplemental dollars on that we haven't been able to fully get going, which this can help us do. For example, one of the things that we can do with Illuminate, and we explored it a couple years ago, and couldn't fully get it automated and going, but you can create an early warning system. So you can set the parameters. You can say if a student drops below a certain grade in English and math, or in core classes, or has this many absences, or has a certain number of behavioral referrals. So you can set up all these parameters, and it will, like on a dashboard, automatically identify kind of like watch list students who you may want to reach out to before waiting for the end of the grading period when it's too late, or before now they're chronically absent. So we have things like that. So that doesn't cost anything additional. That's something we have. This could help us set that up and make it, a system process. And that's something that can continue after the funds, after these funds go, because that's something we use. We fund it out of other funds. But a lot of this work, Joanna, to your point, a lot of this money is meant to be additional temporary people. That's just what it is. You can only partner with, nonprofits to do so much of the work, and they may not be able to even have the capacity to do all the work. And even those are temporary. So they would be possibly temporary hiring staff, and then at the end, not having that need. So that's just the nature. There's not a lot in this plan that can be either automated or that's a software that's not an actual person. So that's part of the issue, kind of what Gary said. It's meant to be temporary. It's meant to be one time. We hope we can somehow find a way to sustain the good parts of it, that we can, keep addressing the needs that we have. But our needs, hopefully, are kind of, peaking right now, and we do have additional student need, and hopefully we can address that with these monies, and then kind of get back down to what it normally is. But obviously there's things we would love to do in addition to what we're doing now anyways with our current situations.
Does some of this go towards PD? Because again, I'm just going back to, I'm just worried that like once this money is gone and this person's gone, then kids will just go back to failing and there's no one there to catch them. Like the fact that we don't have a system now, I don't even know what to say.
Some of it goes towards consult for putting this system in place. And I imagine that through consult, there's also ways to figure out how the system can sustain even beyond some of the positions that are created.
Well, what we have right now, Joanna, is we have systems in place. But what it is we have systems in place that imagine like what you're seeing on this screen, this Brady Bunch screen of faces. We have a system that's different at each school. And so what we're trying to do is it's not about doing something, because we're doing something all over the place. It's doing the right thing, the most effective thing. That's what we need to put in place. And so if a student is coming in and is showing real issues with reading comprehension, and they're a first grader, we should be able to name it and identify what are the strategies that we're going to utilize. And those should be consistent from school site to school site. And that's where the equity comes into play. And that may not necessarily be the case right now. In some schools, it might be identical, but in other schools, it's not. And so now you've got these kids that have these significant needs, and we don't want everybody attacking it in a different way. That's not an effective way to do it. We don't have the resources to be able to do that, so a lot of this is getting everybody on the same page and differentiating where appropriate given the situation, but not just differentiating because every school site wants to do it that way. That's not working very well in that type of a system, because then what that's telling parents is, if my child's having this issue, this social emotional issue, and I'm at this school, I'm going to get a very different approach than if another child, the same issue, has it at another school. That's a problem. And it's not that people are intentionally doing that. It's just the schools they're such independent entities that we need to kind of bring them back together a little bit on intervention types of programs, because we don't have the ability to do an intervention person at this school and this school and this school and this school. And we have to do it. We have to kind of marshal our resources and get the right people to do that work. But it's got to be district led. There's just not enough monies to be able to do that at every school.
So if you want to get a preview of what it might look like in a year or 2 or 3 when some of these things go away, come to the LCAP meeting tomorrow night, and you can just see all the things we're funding out of supplemental and you have to play, to do the mental exercise. So if we wanted to continue some of these things, for example, then what comes off the list? And they're all good things. So it's tough. These are tough discussions. These are tough decisions. At the end of the day, we do, obviously we're confined with what sources we have. Right now, we have some extra resources to try to address this increased temporary need. And that's what this plan is. It's our kind of best plan to date on how we're going to target these specific funds.
We think we're going to be able to string this out though, 2 to 3 years with the funding that we have, because if we use some of the additional funding that's coming, we can use it for the same resources that we're focusing in on in year one. And we can hold that one-time money for, we don't know the deadline dates yet, but it looks like it's going to come in streams. And so we probably have 2 to 3 years where we can really target the needs of our kids that are most, are in the most challenging of circumstances. And then I think we'll have a lot of data at that point. There'll be enough compelling data where I would imagine the board is going to say, come hell or high water, we're going to keep these structures because they work. And we're going to have to find it from something, it's something else is going to have to give. That's a good problem to have. That means it's something that was initiated in 2021, 22 or 2022, 23 was so compelling that it now takes the place of something else.
So yeah, so to Gary's point, just to remind everyone, we looked at it briefly 2 weeks ago, but so these funds is about 4.8 million. They're good till August of 2022. And then the next batch of funds, about another 4 million, is good until the end of 23. And then the next batch is good until the end of 24. So you kind of have about 4 million-ish.
It's September.
Available.
It's September 23 and September 24, right?
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, so to Gary's point, you can kind of string some of this on a little longer if this is what we decide to do with all the rest of that money.
Buys us time to figure out, like you're saying, what we're doing well, to prioritize that, as well as, buys us time to find additional funds if we decide all of this is good and needs to be sustained. It's not a perfect, situation, but I believe it's moving forward, and we're not going to pass up these available funds. I say we move forward.
Yeah, I want to move forward too. I just want to make sure that all the needs are getting met.
Yeah,
I feel like we only have one shot to do this.
It's uncomfortable, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank
I
you.
actually thought that I thought you had some really innovative, interesting ideas in there, Cliff, and this idea of the wellness center and also the community hubs, and it was just I thought for the amount of time that the state gave you, which was absurd, that you came up with not just I thought it was, of course it's going to be difficult to, 2 or 3 years down the road but I do like that it was innovative, collaborative solutions. So, in that sense, I would definitely move forward with it. But I also thought there were some interesting ideas in there that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, to that, I'll just give credit to, this was a stakeholder process on, this was speed dating stakeholder process. So we were looking, these weren't all my ideas by any stretch of the imagination. We looked at San Diego County put out a whole list of potential ways to spend this money in those categories. and Gary kind of kept us focused on, okay, academic and social emotional. Those are the two big things. Because, no offense to Chris and I, but we're like, how much money is it? How much do we have to spend? Okay, let's get it out on a list. And he's like, forget the money. Let's talk about the needs and the ideas first, and then we'll figure out the money later. And then, we got some great ideas from staff and from parents when we put it out to them. So yeah, so it was a whole, it was a team effort.
I think that the test in all of this is going to be that if you have a parent in the district and their child is struggling and they don't feel like we have that we are working with them to address that. And when I say we are working with them, it's not just the teacher in charge, but it's the principal, it's the academics or the social emotional support people. If we're not triaging this thing and they don't feel that, then there's something wrong with how this money is being spent, because the money is intended for those kids that have suffered some loss. It's not intended to be a one size fits all thing. It's intended, so every kid's situation is different, and that makes it hard when you're case managing, but it also, it works. That model works. It's worked for years under response to intervention. Those districts that have figured out how to case manage students have been hugely successful in their work. And we can be too.
And if it's not working, do we have a chance to amend this like a year from now?
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
You'll pivot in probably in May.
Okay, any other questions or comments from anyone on these? All right, so do we vote on all of them? Sorry, my family's making.
Yeah. You just vote on
Can we
vote on all of them?
Yes, you can vote. You could do a motion for 12.3.1, 12.3.2, 12.3.3, and 12.3.4. Approval of those plans.
I move to approve educational services 12.3.1, 12.3.2, 12.3.3, and 12.3.4.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Great job, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, future business. Looks like we have a lot coming up. Training for board members and staff on Title VI and Title IX.
Yay.
Sounds like, well, when is our training?
Your training has
Is it
been
separate?
Yeah, your training has been confirmed.
Okay.
Matthew has those dates.
Okay.
I'll have him, well, it'd probably be easier just for him to email you those dates. It was the 3
Okay.
days that we were looking at the end of July.
Okay.
And it's going to be amazing with a top-notch trainer.
Cool. Who is it?
Babs Kavanaugh.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
I think I thought I shared those with everybody, just
You
so
did?
everyone has them. It's June or July
Okay.
24th.
Could you
Can you
say?
resend those, Matthew?
Yeah, because I didn't.
Okay, I'll resend them.
Thank you.
Thank you. As well as survey of teacher libraries. Sorry, my stuff cut off. Community forum to include feeder districts, parent square presentation, family communication options in other languages, development of a DEI plan, math support, and revision to climate resolution. So those are all things that we have upcoming. Is there anything else?
Yes, I would like to have a presentation about the connection between SEL and the arts. This woman made a presentation at the Arts Alliance, and I think it would be a good presentation for us to hear. Her name's Elizabeth Robertson, and she's pretty amazing. I don't know when we could do that, maybe August or September.
Anyone else? I'd like to look at, we've been talking about Circle Up and it sounds like a DEI plan at some point. I want to start looking at some of the disparities we have at our schools. Like I think about San Antonio, like why is that school 72% Hispanic? Like what is happening that school is not representative of the rest of the population of our district? Like the district's not 72% Hispanic, so why is that the case for our alt ed school? And just looking at other ones, I don't know if that has to be a study session as well. Maybe at the same time, if we plan on doing a study session with Circle Up, but just something to think about.
I think that's a great question, actually.
They may have actually collected data on that as part of their improvement science plan. Because the information on that, because one of the questions, it's one of the essential questions, which the board, because that they were investigating is for the students that are at their current school, in this case San Antonio or Carpe or Sonoma, when did the wheels start falling off the bus? And I believe there was quite a bit that was taking place at the elementary level. Yeah. And of course, a lot of the districts that we were looking at were kids that were not in Petaluma. They were in our neighbor sister districts, but it's a really good question. So I think they have data they can present to you on that.
Okay. So I guess
Related
go ahead,
to,
Sheldon.
Well, it's related to that. I'd love to keep on the front burner dual immersion, and thinking about next steps for that. Chris just gave us the scenario of the budget cliff come 2022-23. I think we have an opportunity here to grow enrollment through dual immersion.
Exactly.
Right around time, possibly. And so anyway, I just want to keep that issue on the front burner, and maybe if there are action items that the board can take a look at and move forward, come in the fall sometime.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. I thought about that too. Like as the numbers decline, that could help us bring more kids in. And I guess related to all of this, like Avid, like looking, we have so much going on, but at some point, I think Maddie and Ellen, you guys have both brought it up before as well, having an Avid program.
A great program. I'm
surprised. We've talked about it many times over the past 25 years, probably. And I don't know why it was never implemented. Yeah, I think it's I don't remember now. I can't. It was something about it did not fit with our district at the time. I don't remember what it was, or it was just never implemented. But it comes up on a regular basis.
Background on that later. There are a couple problematic things that are not related to Avid, but are related to our structure.
So the way kids are scheduled. Is that what it is, Gary?
It's about our period day schedule.
Oh, okay.
Avid's very much, these kids have very specific scheduling, so.
But right now we have like study skills, at least at the junior high level, that if kids are needing academic support, they have to take that class. So,
if you are on the Avid is trying to get you on an A through G track, and so you're taking A through G coursework. If you take Avid, because you have to take that elective every year long, then you can't be on the A through G track at our school, because that means you're missing the visual performing arts elective. There's ways to work around that, but that's a big issue. It's a big issue at a lot of schools that have the same schedule as ours. Is the schedule keeps kids, they have to have an extra class. to be able to do it. And they would have to commit to a 0 period or a 7th period, whatever you want to call it, an AM or a PM class, to be able to do that. And the district would have to commit to that. And then in the school would have to have teachers that were willing to support that. So there's a lot of ifs on it, but it is doable, but that's always been the big challenge.
It's also training. I mean, there's AVID, just like AP training. When you teach AP, you go to a workshop, the same with AVID. So there's PD involved with it.
But it really does work. There's reams of data on it. So 35 years of data.
Can it be placed at our alternative sites? Sorry, I can't talk to you.
You could.
Or does it have to be district wide, or can it just?
No,
be...
it doesn't have to be district wide. But AVID is the philosophy on AVID. The most important trait is the student has to select it. They have to want to do it. Most AVID, I was an AVID demonstration school. Cliff was a principal at it, I think, at an AVID demonstration school. The students select the program. You don't place students in and say, you need this, this is good for you. They have to want to do that. Now, certainly you do a lot of recruiting of kids, and do some asset building, because a lot of kids need to be just encouraged, and reminded of how amazing they are. But they have to want to do it, because because what you're saying is you will thrive as long as in high-end college course or college prep courses, as long as we provide you some elements of supports along the way, because you're probably the first one in your family that's ever had to do this. So you don't know the rules of the game. We're going to help you with the rules of the game. Financial aid, you name it, A through G. We're going to help you with that. Some homework, some tutoring support. But ultimately, you have to want to do it, because you're going to be giving up something to be able to do this. And it's the first thing that they look at when they look at designations for AVID schools. If you're placing students in because you think they need to be in there, then that's not an AVID school.
And it also has to depend on the teacher as well.
Yep.
Because if, students have to want to work with that teacher as well.
All right, anything else? Maddie? Nothing? I'm just messing with you.
You're just messing with me, thanks. No, we've got lots of things on here, some of which I actually mentioned, I think.
Yes. All right, so, action on items heard in closed session. We did take action on case number 202-103-0589. It was approved and it's moving forward. And with that, we are
and approved the resolution for 3.3.1.
Yeah.
Resolution 2021-27. Yes, was approved. Thank you, Gary. All right, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Good luck, everyone.